Welcome to Rapture Recovery, Big Book Step Study, Program of Action. This week we're going to focus on the preface and the foreword to the first edition. We're going to really understand and get some depth and weight and some information about the fellowship, and we're going to get some information that's going to give us depth and weight to the actual big book, and we're going to see how these things intertwine and how God can do for us what we can't do for ourselves. In every single segment, we are going to give you discussion points, and what we're doing by this is we're trying to use this left brain information, and we're trying to move it over into our right brain with some connecting points. We're going to give you action items with every single section of the big book to see if we can get some longevity in the application of this knowledge. So the preface starts out, it took me about 2 years to get here. Okay, so I was going to the fellowship for 2 years. I'd done my steps maybe two and a half times. I had actually never read the preface. I ended up in an in-home meeting, and they started breaking down the preface at a level that I had never heard anyone do. I was really excited about this. I remember going up to the woman who was hosting the meeting, asking her, where did you get this information? To be honest, I was even unaware that a preface existed. She told me that they got the information from this Big Book Step Study that they go to on Tuesday night. It's called it's a Joe and Charlie meeting. And so right there, I left. I looked up Joe and Charlie. I started listening to Joe and Charlie. And this is another Big Book Step Study that I love and I use with a lot of my sponsees to date. I have done 6 in-depth Big Book Step Studies. My journey through step work is actually a combination of all of them. God does for me what I can't do for myself. And He gives me little tidbits and little action items from all these different studies. I'm a woman, so I'm more of a right brain thinker than a left brain thinker. But I do understand that all my right brain activity needs to be based off of some depth and weight that I actually get from the left brain activity of reading the big book and investing in the big book and investing in my journey of sobriety. So in the preface, the discussion point that they give us here is they are celebrating the consistency of the program. So spend some time thinking about this. Discuss this with someone else. Discuss this in a group environment. Reach out to some other people in the program and ask them about their experience, strength, and hope with just the fellowship overall. And really try to create some connecting points with some people that you value their program. You see them serving. We are looking to be spiritual sobriety soldiers in service. Service is the key to my serenity. Service is the key to my sobriety. These 12 steps are going to teach us how to serve. They're going to give us the confidence that we need to serve. It's going to give us the knowledge that we need to serve. But most of all, God is building us up through these activities. God sees us sitting in this Big Book Step Study. God understands that we are willing, and not only are we willing, but we are seeking. In the preface here, they tell us about the stories in the back of the book. Now, these stories were pointed out to me in the very beginning because they gave me this really big book. They told me that pretty much the first half is going to be our step work. And I was like, well, what's in the second half? And those are stories of people's experience, strength, and hope. Those are actually like written speaker meetings. And they rotate. So they're trying to find relating points to all kinds of people in sobriety. So probably a year into sobriety, I was working with a new sponsee that was having a hard time relating to our program. She had been forced into our program. She was constantly looking for the differences instead of the similarities. So out of nowhere, I just told her, go to the back of the book, read a story in the back of the book, find 3 relating points. So what I'm trying to do is combat that negative thinking with positive thinking. So even if it takes you 3 times to read a story, try to find 3 relating points. I don't care if it's the color of pants they're wearing. It does not matter what it is, but find 3 relating points, highlight them and circle them. And I'm going to do the same thing. So again, God is doing for me what I can't do for myself. So I have made a commitment that no matter where we are during the week, whenever this sponsee calls me with a problem, we're going to pause, we're going to pray, we're going to change a thought and move a muscle, and we are going to read one of these stories in the back of the big book, and we're going to try to find 3 relating points. Now, God is doing for me what I cannot do for myself, because in these stories, God is going to teach me consistently how to find similarities and not differences. I can remember the first time I read the Student of Life story in the back of the big book. I thought, I can find absolutely no relating points at all. But throughout my journey of being vigorously honest, all of a sudden this story took on another whole theme in my life. God used this story to make me see where alcoholism was even playing a role in my college life. When I didn't have any money, I was barely meeting ends financially, emotionally, and physically. I was really insecure. God was really building up my confidence. I would have never told you that I was an alcoholic in college, but after reading this story, probably 2 years into sobriety, it's like God opened up that experience to me from another whole view. I started remembering crazy alcoholic experiences that I had in college that my disease had suppressed. I had no idea that stuff happened, but all of a sudden I started remembering the extreme measures that I went to drink underage and in a college environment. So I could see that my alcoholism was progressive, and it was there even back then. There were some other things in my college life that I had put in God's spots, so it kind of crowded it out, and God will use that as a lesson as well with my sobriety journey. I can crowd out alcoholism by replacing all the negative thinking with positive thinking, by waking up every single day and just considering my plans for the day. What am I going to do in this 24 hours? So I spent this journey with this one sponsee. Now, again, I told you that God talks to me through service, okay? I'm not so sure that this would have ever happened if I would not have been serving someone that God could show me this character defect so he could show me that it is my character defect. That actually had nothing to do with that sponsee. That was God talking to me saying, Imogene, I am going to raise you up to a level where you are going to have to relate to all kinds of people in recovery, all kinds of people. I am going to need to work in your brain so you can seek out similarities, not only in this book itself, but in real life. And that is what he did for me. About 2.5 years into sobriety, so about 6 months after I did this activity with this sponsee, yes, this sponsee relapsed. I kept going with the activity though. I started to serve in treatment facilities. The treatment facility that God put me in was more of an addict facility, but this is another whole story of how I ended up there. Because I had spent all this time investing in the stories in the back of the big book and had all these relating points. I'm in these treatment facility meetings. There's no content. There's no direction. There's no formal meeting set up. I said, why don't we go through and read the stories in the back of the big book? So all the girls, there were about 20 or 30 of them, started bringing their big books. The facility provided their big books, but they weren't really using them. So all of a sudden, here I am sitting in a circle. I'm in a treatment facility. I've got all these participants in this treatment program that actually have a big book, but they're not currently using it actively. And they're so excited. They're just so excited to actually have something to bring to the meeting. And so we started reading the stories in the back of the big book. Now remember, I had already highlighted and circled all my relating points. God had done all the legwork for me. So we could go around the circle and get everyone involved. Read a paragraph. If you have a relating point, share on that paragraph. So you see how we're bringing literature into a treatment facility meeting. And guess what? God did for me what I can't do for myself. I had already highlighted and circled all my relating points. So I had a little bit of a topic lead on the story, and it built up the confidence for the other treatment members to read a paragraph and share just like I did. Now tell me that is not God doing for me what I cannot do for myself. When I show up to serve, He will have me do things that I have no idea why I'm doing it, but He will use it in a big way like that. That is a huge burning bush for my sobriety. Okay, now we're going to jump over into the 4 to the 1st edition. Here, the main discussion point is anonymity. This is a huge thing. I'm not going to address this right now, but I highly recommend for you to reach out to other people in the program and get their experience, strength, and hope on anonymity. Go ahead and do some research on the traditions of anonymity, why we're anonymous. God has us operating in the 4th dimension. He has us operating in a spiritual realm. Okay, the world doesn't need to know my name because I'm not that important. But what they do need to know is that I have been saved in my journey of recovery. I have been saved from the disease of alcoholism. My program of action speaks louder than any words whatsoever. The only important name that I got going on is God, right? So I push you. I have a lot of secret ideas of why or why not I should break my anonymity. I've broken my anonymity. I've not broken my anonymity. God gives me the tools and He gives me the direction in each situation. I personally have found more success with keeping and guarding my anonymity than I have in breaking my anonymity. Anonymity is my prized possession. It allows me to operate in a worldly realm with a spiritual purpose. And remember, I am here to be a spiritual sobriety soldier. And so I just trust for God to do for me what I can't do for myself. Do I sit in fear someone's going to find out who I am? Sure I do. I'm human. But God will do for you what you can't do for yourself. I do believe that there's attraction between certain spirits for heavenly reasons, and that God is everything or God is nothing. If my anonymity is meant to be broken, it will be broken. If it's not meant to be broken, it won't be broken. The action item here at the end of the 4 to the 1st edition, they're talking about like your religious denominations out there and how they're not affiliated with any of them. So I thought a great action item for this would be to write a gratitude journal. Again, we're trying to change our thinking from victim states to victor states. Write a gratitude list on your past spiritual or religious experiences. This took me 5 years in sobriety to do. It took me 5 years to uncover remember, everything's not going to happen in the first 30 days of sobriety, but it took me about 5 years to really uncover my spiritual / religious foundation from my childhood. The gratitude that I wrote, first of all, was I went back to, when was the first time I went to church? My mom used to go to church when my parents were still married, and my dad would never go, so there was always a fight, and I always wanted to stay at home with my dad instead of going to church with my mom. So how can I flip that to a gratitude? Because it just looks like conflict to me. The gratitude is that God is showing me my mom is still going to have a spiritual journey without my father. So my spiritual journey is not dependent upon a best friend or a husband. It is actually an individual journey. The second gratitude I wrote is we went to a Presbyterian church. It was very structured. You had to look really nice all the time. It was actually in a part of town that I did not go to school, so I was going to a church that no one from my school went to, so I really did not know anybody there, and I really hated this church for a very long time. I still live in the same city as this church. Like, I had this negative vibe because I just never felt accepted. Well, how do we move that to a gratitude? When I was doing my Big Book Step Study through the Hyannis Method, this is a story for another time, I actually ended up on the campus of this church because my grandparents are buried there, and I ended up doing a prayer walk because I'm doing an amends to this church for all the hate that I did. And I mean, how can you really hate a church? It's there to help. It's because I was putting God-sized expectations on people, places, and things. But all of a sudden, God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I'm looking at these buildings, and I start seeing all these gratitudes jumping out in my head. And I'm standing in the middle of the campus. That I hated youth group that happened in this one building. but God provided a safe place for me to go interact with other kids my age. I hated this childcare building where the Sunday school classes happen. It was the first time I ever heard about Jesus. Also, it was the building that my mom went to divorce care in, and I would go there one night a week, and people would play with me. That's a gratitude. Then I'll look over at the big church sanctuary, and I can see my grandparents sitting on a pew, and there's my mom and the three of us all sitting there. And God gave me, what a safe place. What a safe place you were for 2 hours a week with your grandparents, with your mom, and with your two sisters, all sitting calmly on a pew, no matter what was going on in the outside world. Is that not a true depiction of what my sobriety should look like? Me sitting on a pew and being in a safe place no matter what is going on outside of that church. Again, these are 3 gratitudes that took a long time for me to find. The third gratitude I wrote was the next journey was actually happened when I got sober for the very first time, did not come into this program. I threw myself into a church, and I wasn't accepted at the level that I thought I should be accepted at. And God did for me what I can't do for myself. I had to go visit that church as well and sit there and think, what is a gratitude that came from this church? And he told me, God told me, you learned how to operate in an organization. You understand the importance of structure. You understand the importance of contributing. Even though you did not get validated for all your contributions at that point, I'm getting ready to validate you on a spiritual level that you were never validated there. Never. And I needed you here. God needs you here today. He needs you on a sobriety journey. He needs you to share your experience, strength, and hope so he can gear you up for Me Too moments to save other people in sobriety. This is the challenge of our life right here. This is where you will find purpose like no other, because it is on a spiritual realm. It is not on an earthly realm. And all we have to do today is stay sober for this 124 hours. So thanks for listening.